Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to our weekly Zoom lesson. This is Raspberry. Most of you know him. I've been wanting to do this lesson for a long time, and I just keep forgetting or moving on to a different subject momentarily. This is an important lesson. I think you guys instinctively know all the time because you're natural and you want to do right by your horse. There's an intuitive sense that you should ask for something before you ask for something. And what that means is you don't just tell your horse to move. For instance, if I need him to shift that way so he doesn't step on my feet or something, I could just push on him and tell him to move. But it's and that's normal and that's fine. We all do that to some level. But it's kinder if I reach for his connection, ask for a response, and then ask him to move. It's like we ask before we ask, and it really sets the horse up for better communication, softer communication, happier communication. You're not surprising them with your leg cues. You're not jumping to conclusions that they're going to respond to you, and then when they don't, you're upset. So I'm going to use my legs a lot today when I'm riding, and you're going to see me do something with my hands before I cue him with my legs, and that's the part I wanted to show you. But I wanted to show you here first. If I'm going to push with my leg, I'm going to get a connection here. Now I can get a connection with my hand, a visual connection like this. You see it? But when I'm on his back, I need a similar kind of connection, and I usually get that with my hands. And when he says yes to a really simple, soft touch, that gives me the sensation that we are connected. That little contact that he just reached for my hand, if he will reach for my hands with the feel of the lead rope here, and he hesitated and then he responded with a yes. If he will reach for my hands, that tells me when I'm riding that I can now ask for the leg cue or the canter pirouette or the transition or whatever it is I'm asking for. I don't just tell him what to do. I ask him what to do. And I'm going to show you real quick. I need him to back up so I can untie the lead rope. I'm just going to show you time after time today. I want you to see how often I ask him before I ask him. So I need him to back up so I can untie the lead rope and then we can carry on with our ride. But before he backs up, I need him to say, yes, I'm with you. So a simple gesture of putting his head down, maybe even curling his head a little bit, just like that. Only off the feel of the rope. And then I say, now back up. And we get a nicer response backing up. And we get a more connected feel. And of course, all of that leads to something even more magical at the end of your journey called collected riding. If he's connected, then he can be collected. But if he's not connected, all you're really doing is demanding responses from him. And that's really tough. So, I mean, tough for him, tough for a horse to sort of have to do something when they may not be ready for it mentally. Their mind might be on something else. They might have a hiccup in their tank. They might need to stop and go poop, whatever it is. If you just tell them to do something, it's a little bit rude. But if I ask him, are you with me? And then ask him to do something when he says, yes, I'm with you, then we've got something really cool going on. So I'm going to walk into my little ramp in here. Just because this just so happens to be the best place to film. We've got great lighting. I'll get that. And we have a contained space for you guys to see so I don't get too far out of distance audio-wise too. Check my girth. Now he hasn't warmed up. I literally just pulled him off the fence. So I'm going to do just a tiny little bit of warm up. There you are. Invite him into motion. Hey, sweetie. Hey, itchy today, huh? Off we go. Now I'm gonna ask him to go off and move and walk and trot and canter, but notice how I don't just tell him. First, there's a suggestion, and then we get into motion. It's not a demand. I don't just slam on the gas pedal and say, go, go, go. Just need to walk for a little bit, warm up those legs. This horse can be quite physically stiff. He's that kind of horse that doesn't love to put a lot of energy out. So he tends to be just a little bit tight in his body. So a little warm up here to get the blood flow down to his legs. It's going to help us out. Now I'm going to ask him to trot next. But what I need is not for him to hold the trot, but to say yes to a question. I'm going to make a suggestion. And he said yes to my suggestion. That was really subtle and hard for you to see, most likely. But I lifted my hand, and he looked over towards me. Watch this. When he's on a circle, it's different. It's more subtle. But watch this. I'm going to reach my hand towards him. And he reaches back. It's very visible. It's very noticeable. It's a habit we've developed together. I reach my hand towards him. And he makes this subtle little gesture like he sees me. I'm doing the same thing on the lead. I'm lifting and I'm waiting for him to see me, to check in that we're together. And it's more subtle, but it's the exact same response. There it is. Now we can go. There's the suggestion. Oh, you think we're doing something else. That's okay. Suggestion. Does he see me? Does he see me? Does he see me? Does he see me? He sees that fly. Big bumblebee. He's looking at that thing. Does he see me? Does he see me? Does he see me? There, he sees me. Now go. Off we go into a trot. There, he sees me. Good. The lesson today is that every suggestion comes with a pre-suggestion. And it looks like that in a sense of mentally, emotionally, he sees me move and he sort of looks toward me. I know, we got some other tricks, don't we? So I'm going to ask him into the trot again. I'm going to lift my hand and look, he checks in with me. Oh, I don't know, it's harder to see on the camera, but his eye is looking this way and I raise my hand and his eye looks back at me. And that's my signal that he sees my suggestion to connect. And from there, we can move on. Good job. We got a little bit of warm up. How does a horse know the difference between hands moving about prepping for a suggestion, for a cue or a transition, and hands moving about sort of randomly doing nothing at all? I'm just talking to you. How does he know the difference between the two? Well, one is I'm more subtle in my that I'm more subtle than most people can see, but you can do the same. When I want something from him, my eyes are laser focused like I'm a Rottweiler on a hunt. But when I don't need something from him, my eyes and my energy is more like a golden retriever. I'm just sort of hanging with him. My hands move about, flit about, and he's less anxious about what they might mean. But then when I want something, my energy and focus dials, my eyes dial in onto the part of his body I want to move. The hand suggestions become very meaningful at that point. Okay, so I'm just about to get on. Check my girth. I could just climb on. He probably will allow me. He's a calm, easygoing horse, but I would prefer to check he's actually connected to me. Look at this. For a moment, look at this. For a moment, he's in La La Land. He's kind of calm and sweet, but he's like, not interested in you. You reach for me, and I'm not sure that I really want to reach back. It's not anything malice. It's just the cycles the horse will go through in any kind of moment by moment daily exchange. So I reach for him, and he's like, no. So what I do when I'm riding is this. I grab hold of the reins, and I ask for him to respond to that feel. And he's just leaning on it like he's gone to sleep. Give him a little bit of life. There, he responds to the feel. Check in. Nothing. There, we got a response to the feel. So instead of just hopping on, I'm first going to check that he is, hello, on the same planet as me. Thank you. There we are. I'm so glad he failed that test, because had I just got on, you would have seen a calm horse accepting a rider, but not mentally connected to the rider. And this is going to transfer into everything I do. There you are. I use my voice a lot too. If I kiss and I cluck a lot when I want. There we are. When I want him to connect to me. It's not just a physical touch, but when I'm riding, I'm going to grab with my reins and ask him to tip his nose just like that. And that will tell me he's in a responsive state of mind. Let me just check he's balanced, ready for me. Sometimes when you wiggle the saddle back and forth like this, they shift their feet and they sort of square up, and it's useful. If you look at a horse that's standing sort of crooked or not square, and then you just go to get on, you might cause them to sort of take a few fumbly steps as you climb up there. So you can square them up. I'm going to check my girth one more time. True. So true, true, true. I think I am a little high on this side, so go to the other side. Thank you. There's a good deep breath from him. He's not an anxious type horse. He is just, like I said before, the kind of horse that doesn't like to put out a lot of energy out. Hey? Now, I believe I was the last one to ride in this saddle, but in case I wasn't, there's a simple check that I like to do. You probably have heard of it. Stick this in your armpit so it's touching, and you lay your hand up the stirrup, and you should be able to reach the end of the stirrup leather. I actually prefer to be able to reach almost the middle of the saddle, not quite, just an inch or two short of the saddle, and that's about the same length as my leg. So sometimes like a student will say, can you ride my horse? And I'll get down on the ground next to the horse and do this, and I'm like reaching over the top, so I have to lengthen that stirrup, and I get a pretty good approximate guess of how long my stirrups need to be. Come, gotta hop on again, check in. There's my check-in. That's a visual check-in, and if I don't want the visual, I'll go for the tactile check-in. Will you respond physically to my suggestion? Wake up. There. That tells me he gets into a responsive state of mind. And finally, I can hop on here. Oh, I could give you so many lessons on every subject. I'll just highlight a few. The stirrup length. I'm going to climb up into this saddle without a mounting block. It's a treeless saddle, so it can slide really easy. So I need to grab hold of the mane, and I need to get my weight over the top of the saddle as quickly as possible so I don't just drag it. If I just hang onto the saddle, I'm going to drag it to the side. Give myself a little hop and up, over. So now all my weight's over the top, and I don't pull the saddle on with me. It's harder on a taller horse. All right, we made it. We're riding. Oh boy, it's been a while, huh? You and me. He's been our kind of Tony the pony. A lot of people get to work with him and play with him because he's safe and he's calm. He doesn't have a lot of baggage. But I'm about to make a suggestion for him to go. But instead of going forward, I'm going to instead ask him to back up because I think checking the brakes is more important than checking your gas pedal in almost any vehicle. So there's his response to my hands. He says yes. He puts himself in a responsive mood. And now I need him to just take a few steps back. That's something you can train all day long, even on the ground. Exactly what I just did. You can work with your hands, the visual, the tactile. You can put your horse in a responsive mood before you ask them to do something. So ask before you ask is the lesson today. I'm going to ask him again to back up. First, put him in a responsive mood, and then take those few steps back. And why backwards instead of forwards? Like I said, good brakes. I got my pilot's license a number of years ago, and the instructor on my very first flight says to me, "What's the first thing you do when you get in a plane?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. You check all the dials." He says, "No, you check the brakes. You just put your foot on the brake and make sure it works. And then you start the engine and you let it roll forward. And then you check the brakes again, because you got to land this plane someday and you want to make sure you land safely. So brakes first. This is all in my books and all over the online courses that you take. But the lesson that isn't really highlighted is this one here. I'm going to ask if he's ready to move forward now. Put him in a responsive state of mind. He says yes. I could hold that. I'm not going to hold that right now. That's later. That's more of a collected thing. I'm working on a connected thing. So I ask him to get in a responsive mood. He says yes. And then I ask him forward. It's that simple. I'm going to do that multiple times as I go around. You're going to see me ask him to become responsive and then ask him for what I want. Ask to be responsive and then ask for what I want. Now, there's some mechanical things that have to happen more suddenly. Like if I have to turn to miss an obstacle, it doesn't work in that same kind of slow ask before you ask format. Sometimes you have to be very direct and very abrupt. I'm giving you permission to be that. You don't have to be perfect all the time. But generally with transitions, especially upward transitions, you're going to ask before you ask. Now, I can feel a connection between him and I. I can feel how responsive he is. I can feel how quiet he is. I can feel his willingness. And so you'll see my communication with him is more subtle. Because we're so connected, our communication is more subtle. If I was riding a young colt, the communication would be more obvious. So I'm going to go forward here. But just before I go forward, I'm highlighting this for you to see. He says yes. He becomes in a responsive mood. And then we go forward. If I were doing dressage, I would ask him to get into that responsive mood, and then I'd hold it there. That would be the collected part of connection. I'd ask for this responsive yes response, so he becomes very good at thinking, oh, we're together. Then I would hold that connection as we moved about. He's learned some of that. We did a whole series on it last year. You can look on the weekly Zoom lessons that have been recorded for you and follow those steps exactly like we did with him, so you can learn about collection and not just connection. But today's lesson is meant to highlight connection. I'm going to now ask him into a trot. But before I ask him into a trot, I'm going to ask him to be in a responsive mood. with my hands, and he says yes to my hands. Now I feel like we can lift into the trot. He didn't right away. I squeezed and he didn't, but he did give me some energy. So I say, thank you for the energy. I'm going to ask for a responsive mood, and then we're going to say, up we go into the trot. Now he's not dialed in. He's not jumping at my suggestions. That's the whole point of this. Ask him to get into a responsive mood, and then ask him forward. I can do that with my legs too. I can play that game. I can play this game right here, where he connects with me. I can play that game with my legs. You don't see it, but I can hold my legs on a real soft manner and wait for him to sort of look to this, like, do you see that? He looks at me, but that doesn't work when you're riding. You need him to look internally towards you, and that's really hard to describe. You need him to feel you instead of look to you, but it's the same thing. They're identical. I'm going to squeeze with my legs or my hands, and I'm going to say, do you see me, feel me, hear me? And if he says, yes, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, then I say, great, we're ready now to go for a walk. And that way I'm not surprising him with my aids and my cues. I'm going to work into the trot again. I'm going to say, do you feel me? And he says, yes, perfect. Now let's work into the trot. It doesn't always make them snappy, but what it does do is give you grace in your communication. It makes you elegant. And elegant is more important than jumpy snappiness. I'm going to go forward again. I'm going to ask for him to say yes, and then I'm going to say, head out into the trot. Say, yes, I'm with you. Now let's go. He's feeling good today, just lazy. I'm going to make a roll back turn. I'm going to back turn and head out in a new direction. But before I make all those turns, watch the subtle things. See that? He said, yes. He said, yes, I'm with you. He says, yes, I'm with you. Now we take that connection and we apply our leg cues and our aids, and we roll over to a new direction. I'm going to head out into the trot, and I could just squeeze. Remember, I can have that subtlety in my legs too. I can just sort of squeeze and say, do you feel me? And he says, yes. And then I say, great, let's trot. You get to know your horse. You get to know the different ways to communicate. Primarily, though, today I wanted to show you the one with the hands, because that one is, if I had a really fast, anxious horse, you would see how important that was to keep him connected and calm. With him, it's more about keeping him responsive. So I'm going to ask him now, say yes to my hands, and now let's head out into the trot. I'd like to develop that canter. Just a few steps today. What I need is something between the trot and the canter. I like to call it the tranter. It's a few simple steps of speed in the trot before I ask for canter, because I need him to say yes on an incremental level. When you're playing the piano, you go from middle C up to high C, but there's all those black keys in the middle, right? When you're playing the piano and you notice that there's those black keys in the middle, you should address them. Same with working with your speed, walk, trot, and canter. There's black keys in the middle of that octave. Black keys in the middle of those gates. So I ask for a yes and a trot. On my black key here is to ask for faster trot. And then he does this little tranter thing. It's kind of a half in between trot canter. And that tells me we're ready for the actual canter. I'm going to walk through that again, only this time demonstrating more with my hands, those preparatory cues. Does he say yes? Yes. Trot. I'm going to speed up that trot. Does he say yes to my hands? Yes. Speed up that trot. Finally, I'll ask him one more time. Do you say yes to my hands? Can you say yes to my hands? He's saying yes to my legs. Now let's canter. And then when I come back down, if he's truly connected to me, when I come back down, I just take my foot off the gas pedal. I don't have to pull him back down. I don't have to use my brakes. Now I can use my brakes if I need to make a sudden stop, like you do in your car. But if you see the city in front of you and you're on the highway and you know that the speed limit's going to change, you don't have to put your brakes on at every speed change. You can just take your foot off the gas pedal and your car will slow. And that's what he's doing for me. If he's connected, he'll do that for me. It's the coolest feeling in the world. If you got a connected horse and you just sort of quit riding, they pedal back and they find you. They're already with you. They're like, oh, he must not need any more, so I'm not going to give any more. That's different than what we call cruise control. Cruise control is where you take your legs off, but you still have energy in your body and riding in your seat, and your horse says, oh, I should keep going. But when you just take that life out of your body and he's connected and he comes back down for you, that's a wonderful feeling, isn't it? Be good. I'm just going to go the other way for balance, and then we'll call it a day with him, and I'll pick up the camera from Rachel and ask any questions if you have them. Answer any questions if you have them. Okay. I'd like to go for a walk. He says yes. Let's move out. Good. I'd like to go for a trot. I'm going to ask him, are you ready for my signal to trot? And he's hesitating right now. I can feel it in my hand. Then he said yes. I don't know why he'd hesitate. Maybe he had a hiccup, saliva in his throat, whatever. Just a moment where he says, oh, give me a second. That's good to know. Can you imagine if I just asked him to trot before he was ready to even consider trotting? Then I'd get a swishy tail and I'm going to get negative ears and all kinds of problems. So I'm going to say, are you ready to have a conversation with me? And he says, yes. Good. Let's trot together then. I'm going to work on the black keys for a minute. I want to work towards that canter. I'm going to say, are you ready to speed up? He says, yes. Good. So I'm going to speed him up here. There's my little trot canter steps. Finally, I'm going to say, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? He's hesitating. There we go. Let's go for a canter together. Good job. And then just like before, he's connected. I can just take the life out of my body. And he feels like, oh, I might as well just slow down because he doesn't need anything from me anymore. Just going to do a little rollback, facing directly into the sun. Let's square him up a little bit here. There we go. One last thing. I'm done. We're done. But I'm not going to drop the reins just yet because he's got this sort of tightness in him just from kind of anticipating, what do I want? What do you want next for me? And he's sort of lifted and tight. And by holding those reins for those extra 2 or 3 seconds, I hope you saw that. I didn't release with tension, and then he released his tension, and I rewarded that release. It's a different, more masterful, more elegant way of communicating with your wonderful equine partner.